In common with many painters and sculptors, Victor Pasmore has turned from conventional traditions to the practice of modern abstract art. But for years, Pasmore was equally well known as a painter of more realistic subjects. His pictures repeated the developments of Impressionism. Though the style varied from picture to picture, it always expressed Pasmore's own personality, his sensitivity to tone and colour, his interest in the changing effects of light and atmosphere, and his feeling for the structure of a scene. All Pasmore's work has been part of an unbroken sequence of experiment.
There are different methods and processes of thinking. Obviously, a logician thinks in terms of words, but a mathematician thinks in terms of number and measurement. An artist thinks in terms of visual images.
He has looked at the world in terms of visual logic, and his inquiries have developed through particular images. A wave. A scene by the river in London. And the patterns of growth made by the branches of a tree. It has been a sequence of transformation which has taken more than 10 years to work out. It has been a developing process from the forms of nature to forms of his own invention. A wave becomes a spiral.
My attitude to painting has been scientific in its approach, and the development from naturalism to the abstract has involved a kind of metamorphosis from painting from effects to one of developing from processes.
In a sketch, the wave is combined with rocks and clouds. A new image represents a rock. As his work moves away from a direct illusion of reality, it approaches a form of art which is as pure as music. The symbols which Pasmore has extracted from waves and rocks have now become subjects in their own right. Shapes which refer back to nature are combined with others of his own invention. Pasmore's interpretation of this view of the river developed in the same way. His first reaction was to the structure and composition of his impressionistic paintings of the scene. Then the shapes became symbols freed from any direct reference to visual reality. They became a part of pictures and of three-dimensional constructions assembled from pieces of painted wood. Pasmore's tree paintings went through a similar sequence of transformation. He worked towards a point of no return, where all traces of representational art gradually disappeared.
Perhaps the most significant factor about this new approach to painting and sculpture, completely free from natural representation, is the fact that it provides a completely new and more dynamic relationship between the work of art, the artist, and the spectator. In classical naturalism, the spectator was always at a distance from the work. The work was something which operated partly or mostly in his imagination. But in this new approach, the work of art is an actual object, and the spectator can get a new dimension by actually feeling the work, handling it, and if it were large enough, he could get into it. The work of art becomes an object, a real object, in its own right. And this applies just as much not only to construction or sculpture, but also to two-dimensional painting. The painting, unlike the naturalist painting, needn't be observed straight in front of it. The spectator can get different, equally vital experiences by looking at it sideways, or above it, or below it, and so forth. Well, I think there are two factors which point to the validity of this development. One is the fact that it represents an evolutionary step in the history of the visual arts, comparable perhaps to the development of pure chamber music in the 18th century, and even with the development of pure mathematical reasoning in ancient Greece. The other is the fact that it does answer the dilemma of the contemporary naturalist painter and sculptor brought about by the modern philosophy of science. Now, by creating this new dynamic relationship, essentially human relationship, between the work of art and the spectator, I think the abstract artist, the modern abstract artist, is constructing something solid and stable, which competes effectively
with the fluid, four-dimensional, space-time concepts of modern thought.
Although the outward appearances are different, inwardly they are the same. I am still concerned in my new work with structure, with pattern, with light and space. These things are fundamental both to naturalistic and impressionist painting and to a modern abstract art. I think people respond to shapes and colors for inner reasons. Shape calls up associations, often for purely subconscious reasons.
Pasmore likes to work with modern tools. His room looks more like a workshop than a studio. He likes the satisfaction of handling the solid materials from which he makes his art. His constructions are tangible, man-made objects, things which are also art.
I think the time has come now for the artist to come out of his studio into the world. Purely formal painting does make it possible for an integration of the painter and the architect. In fact, the painter is a form of architect.
In addition to designing mural paintings, Pasmore has also worked directly with two architects, Frank Dixon and Peter Daniel. They've designed a part of the Peterlee New Town in County Durham. There's a link between Pasmore's abstract art and the appearance of these new homes. Pasmore believes that modern art creates a unity of purpose between painting, architecture, and sculpture. He feels there's been a break with the cultural habits of the past, and that the modern artist can play an increasing part in our lives.
Well, certainly he started off in an ivory tower, and it was essential that he should do so. He could never have got going had he not taken that step into seclusion. But the time is coming now when he can emerge from this tower and take a part in everyday life.